what if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them?
Spending is a tax. As soon as the government spends money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money.
Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth.
The Patrick Riggins Show. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome to the Patrick Riggins Show. You don't need no finesse and no personality. Just two arms and an attitude, and everybody sing with me. Reaching way back into the 80s for some Morris Day and the time. Yes, it's that time of the week again. Time for logic and reason to prevail. This is one of the few shows on the radio or television that makes their arguments using common sense. We don't use political arguments. We don't defend any particular political party. What we do defend are the true original American values of freedom and liberty. But those values aren't just limited to Americans, though, and oh no, every human being around the world deserves these unlimited rights. And yes, I said unlimited. The rights of human beings are unlimited. The only thing you cannot do is infringe on those same unlimited rights of another human being. Other than that, you should be free to do as you wish. Unfortunately, there isn't a single government in the world that allows that. Nope, not even here in the land of the free. But that's why we continue to fight. And from the looks of things these days, I won't ever be bored or have nothing to do. Fighting for freedom and liberty provides me with endless job security. Before we get started, I should mention, if you don't know already, you're listening to the Patrick Riggins Show. We are the flagship show of the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, and we are heard around the world on it, as well as broadcast locally from our home base in Knoxville, Tennessee, on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. If you watch television or listen to the radio at all, then you know, starting now at Thanksgiving and continuing through the new year, we'll be treated to hundreds of public service announcements from soldiers located around the world, wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving, a Merry Christmas. Oh, wait, they probably aren't allowed to say that in the military now that it's more important to be politically correct than to train to defend the country. So I guess those people will be saying happy holidays instead. Less chance of offending someone by restricting the soldiers from expressing themselves in non-approved ways. But anyway, we'll be seeing all these holiday wishes from the troops from around the world this season. Now, does this not bother anyone else besides me? I think it's disgraceful that we have our soldiers stationed all around the world, playing policeman or babysitter, depending on the country in which we're located. But we have our soldiers out there in harm's way, and for what? Because we demand the world recognize us as a world power? Because we demand respect as a country? It's a different outlook when you realize it isn't us, the citizens, sending our troops around the world on frivolous missions. It's our dang government. Now, I touch on this from time to time on this show, but I'll ask it again. How many of you know someone or have known someone in an abusive relationship? It's a friend whose husband or wife, but let's face it, it's usually the wife. She's in this relationship, and the husband or boyfriend, he just treats them like garbage. He doesn't trust her. He's always calling her to check up on where she is. He doesn't tell her she's pretty anymore. He flat out doesn't appreciate her and takes her for granted. But she dang better be at his beck and call. She better have dinner ready when he gets home. She better understand why he spends so much time with the guys or fishing or whatever he's doing without her. You see, she has to live according to his time schedule. Now, how many of you have known someone in this kind of relationship and you beg them to leave? But whenever you bring him up, she goes into full defense mode, justifying everything he does, defending him no matter what, even within her own family, her parents, her brothers and sisters. No, she'll say, you just don't understand him like I do. Oh, but they do understand. They understand he doesn't love and respect you. They understand that you're just a toy, a means to an end. This is how the government is treating not only us as citizens, but everyone around the world. This is what's so frustrating to people like me, trying to get you to see the light. But just like one of your family wouldn't give up trying to get you out of this abusive relationship, I'm not going to give up on getting you to see this government as it truly is. Now, when I say things like that, people say, oh, Patrick, he's anti-government. That's the catchphrase big government types use to try and shut down your argument. No, I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-tyranny. I'm anti-totalitarianism. I'm anti-unnecessary government intrusion. You see, I don't agree with nor condone abuse by a police officer. But that doesn't make me anti-police. It makes me anti-police abuse. Look, if you want respect, you have to give respect. If you want love, you have to give love. This is what wrecks relationships on a personal level. Why do people split up? Because one person ends up giving and giving and the other taking and taking. You can't have a healthy long-term relationship doing that. Well, look at how our government deals with people. It certainly doesn't respect them. It's wholesale violating not only our rights, the citizens, the ones supposedly in charge of this country, but the rights of human beings all around the globe. And I think with that lack of respect comes hand in hand a lack of love for people. Because you can't love someone you don't respect. You might say it's love, but in the end it's really about using others. So if we, and by we I mean government, so if our government treats people around the world in this way, is it any surprise when we get that very treatment back? We preach love and respect, but for the last century, we've been running around the world, toppling governments with which we don't agree, installing dictators and others, and in general, trying to impose our will on everyone else. Now, who in the world, on a personal level, would behave in that manner? And who in the world would put up with another country doing that? We certainly wouldn't. But Patrick, we give them foreign aid, so we should have a say in how their governments run. Well, number one, we shouldn't even have foreign aid. That's welfare on a country level. If it isn't the right thing to do on a personal level, then it isn't the right thing to do on a country level. Number two, we pay off the government, they should listen to us. So what are we? A country that bribes other countries to do what we want? Or are we a bully who says, do what we'll say, or we'll send our military over? You see, either way, we lose. Either way, it always goes back to the fact we shouldn't be poking our nose into other countries' business. We wouldn't allow it in our country. We wouldn't allow Russia to tell us who we should be electing. Or even better, working to undermine our election process and installing a leader with whom they agree. When you aren't sure if you should be doing something or not, just think of it that way. Would we like another country doing that to us? Would we stand for another country to meddle in our business? And both sides do this, liberals and conservatives. Heck, the conservatives go crazy any time it appears the United Nations is in any way violating the sovereignty of the United States. Start talking New World Order or world government and watch the sparks fly. But they don't have any problem at all with us violating the sovereignty of other countries, covertly or overtly. Either way, it's okay. Because as I said on this show just this last week, we're the good guys, so it's okay. If you didn't catch that show, you can listen to it and any of our shows in the archives at youtube.com/Patrick Riggin Show. That's youtube.com/Patrick Riggin Show. You don't have to sign up for anything. Just type that web address in and you can listen to any of the shows in the archive. Hey, guess what? We're up on the first break of this hour of the exciting Patrick Riggin Show. When we get back from this break, we'll talk a little bit about how this government is intruding on not only our lives, but everyone else's too. Join us for that and even more after the break here on the Patrick Riggin Show on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network.
That I set my sights on Monday and I got myself undressed.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggin Show. A little symphony of destruction there from Megadeth for you hard rockers out there. We're here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Starting off this segment, I want to ask you a quick question. Why is it you can have a border between two countries and one country does so much better than the other one? For example, East and West Germany had a border right through the city of Berlin, and one side did much better than the other. They were the same people, Germans, on either side of that border. A lot of times, same families. But there were stark differences between the two sides of that city. Same people, same town, different outcomes. What was the difference between the two sides? The political leadership, the government. That's the difference. Look at America. We've had a very successful 20th century, but it seems as if we've hit a snag. We've hit some rocks coming into the bay. And incidentally, that's where this radio show and the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network come in. We're providing that lighthouse to guide you past those rocks and back into the safety of the Bay of Freedom and Liberty. So, yes, I'm working in a plug there. So we've hit this little snag in our economy. We can't seem to get things turned around and moving again. Why is that? It's because our government has been sucking up all the resources and squandering them in this massive, inefficient government machine. Just look at all the technological talent that's been siphoned away into government just to spy on you. All of these smart people who are using their talents to chip away at the freedom and liberty of their fellow citizens. Not to mention all the money being wasted in government. Money that could be used by you to buy things you want or need. But you can't because you had to send that money to government through taxes and fees and fines. All throughout history, government, or what's passed for government, used to be made up of people who wanted to be in charge of the country pretty much to enrich themselves, to take the country's riches for themselves and their friends, reap the spoils, so to speak, of a country by being the people in charge. You still see this all around the world. Governments who live high on the hog while their citizens barely scrape by. The people in power are enjoying all of the benefits of the resources of the country while the population gets hardly anything. But in this country, in America, the government was supposed to only have barely enough to get by, and the people possessed all of the money and riches of the country. All of that was supposed to be in private hands. All the power, the money, the freedom, the liberty was supposed to be retained by the people of this nation. Practically spells it out in our Constitution. Remember, the Constitution isn't to give the people rights, to give us permissions to do certain things. The Constitution is a restriction on government. It's supposed to severely limit the power of the government, only giving it certain limited permissions to carry out certain limited duties that we as citizens didn't want to take care of ourselves. What's happened over the last 100 years or so is the government's been getting out of control. The government has decided to take the resources of the people of this country and use them for them itself. Did you know right now the federal government owns nearly 650 million acres of land? That's almost 30% of the land area of the United States. Nevada is almost 90% federally owned land. Alaska is 3/4 federally owned. This is in America. This is the American government owning the natural resources of the American people. The government has grabbed land, grabbed cash, grabbed gold, grabbed business and technology talent, and now it's grabbing your freedom and liberty. Can you imagine how far along we would be with things like the internet and other technology if the government wasn't sucking up the talent our schools turn out? If they weren't wasting their time violating our constitutional rights by spying on us? This is why a whole lot of people are starting to describe this government as a tyranny. It's taking power from the people of this country and using it to benefit itself and those it employs. Did you know one of the fastest growing segments of our society, employment-wise, is government? It's also one of the highest paid. Government. Government people making more money than people in the private sector. Now, how is that right? And God forbid the people of this country push back to demand the country stop spending up all the money and our resources. What happens when we do that? They shut everything down. The government tries to make it as hard on the citizens as it can. And instead of getting mad at the government, we get mad at the people trying to hold it to account. Well, why is that? Well, because, Patrick, those people doing that aren't on my team. Almost every one of these senators who were around during the Bush years complained about all the spending by the federal government, complained about the debt limit being raised over and over. And all their loyal cult followers did the same. What are the marching orders being sent down by the party's chiefs? Oh, yeah, well, that's what I believe, too. Whatever they tell me to believe, that's what I believe. Too much spending during Bush. Too much murdering of innocent people around the world through drone attacks. Too much violating of international law and natural human rights. All of that during the Bush years. Oh, that was bad. But Obama's doing the same things. Heck, even greatly exceeding what Bush did. And the Obama cultists are more than happy to let it go on. Because you see, it's our guy. He's from our party. So whatever he does must be the right thing to do. You ever see these same people, the ones that are the most smug? They think they're the most intellectual. They're the ones that everyone wants to quote. They want to say, so-and-so said this, or I saw this person on the news and they said what Obama was doing is legal, so I agree with it. They're the smartest in the room, but they're the ones who follow the cult leaders of these two parties around like sheep. They may have advanced degrees, but they don't have any common sense, nor backbones. It's all about supporting their team. That's why I say here on this radio show, we don't support any team other than the human one. We fight for the rights of human beings no matter where they live. Everyone deserves to be free. Everyone deserves to be left alone. I don't care if you're white, black, brown, yellow, short, tall, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, green, or confused. If government was minding its own business and staying out of ours, it wouldn't matter at all. Everyone would be treated the same. You might say, Patrick, why does government want to tell us what to do in the first place? Why do they feel like they need to? Well, that's a good question. Why would they feel like they need to tell us what to do? Or let me put that a better way. Why would you feel like you need to tell someone else what to do? It's because either you don't think they're capable of telling themselves what to do or making themselves to do something, or you don't think they're doing what they should be doing. It's one of those two things. These people in Washington don't say to themselves, well, we're going to do this because we're mean people. Now, there's probably a few in government who think that way, but it's a very, very small percentage. Most people aren't that way. Most people aren't purposely mean to other people. So again, why would they want to tell others how to live? Well, it's the same reason I just gave you for personally doing it. Either you think the people of this nation are capable or you don't think the people of this nation are capable of doing something, or you think they should, but they aren't. In both cases, you think people aren't making the correct decisions in how they lead their lives. Correct decisions meaning correct in your eyes. You see it as a correct decision. That doesn't actually make it a correct one, just the one you decided was correct. So since people aren't acting in the way the government wants them to, it passes laws and regulations requiring it. And if you don't obey, government will fine or even imprison you, all because it deems you aren't acting like you should. You have to be treated like a child. The government doesn't treat you like an adult, doesn't even respect you like one. If it did, it wouldn't bother trying to tell you how to live. Keep in mind this whole time, you aren't hurting anyone else. You aren't infringing on another person's rights. You aren't even acting in the way, or you just aren't acting in the way the government wants you to act. That's it, nothing more. Does this put government intrusiveness, does this put that in a different light for you? That maybe it isn't any of the government's business what you're doing? You don't have any right to impose your will on another person, whether you be an individual or government. Makes no difference. All right, we're up on the half-hour break of the Patrick Riggins Thanksgiving weekend extravaganza. In the next half hour, I have something for everyone out there thinking that maybe it's time to throw in the towel, that this country's already lost. It's just too far gone to bother. That and more when we come back here for the second half hour of the Patrick Riggins Show on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. That's right. Mama said knock you out. That's what we're doing here each week. Knocking out deception, the propaganda, the outright lies being told by our government on, well, almost an hourly basis. I was going to say daily, but the lies come out way more often than that. Welcome back to the second half hour of the big show this week. You're listening to the Patrick Riggins Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Every week I get lots of emails about the show, and I also run into quite a few listeners on the street. Occasionally some of these people ask me, Patrick, why don't you just throw in the towel on all this? The country's lost. Too many people are getting government aid. Too many people have a vested interest in having government running everyone's lives. Americans are sheep. There's a few people who try to stand out and be patriots and fight for our natural human rights, but most people just aren't interested. To bolster their argument about the lack of support for the ideas of freedom and liberty, they'll frequently point to the Revolutionary War, where most people in this country weren't fighting. In fact, quite a few people supported the British. They'll tell me, you see, even back then, as important as the war for independence was, we couldn't get widespread support for freedom and liberty. Listen, I know this argument is attractive. I know it's really easy to give in and start thinking this way, especially when you watch the news and listen to the radio and even talk to your fellow citizens. What I always ask these people is, though, if the odds were so stacked against these patriots fighting this war, if they were such a small minority and they only had about 30% of the people supporting them, then why did they win the war? How were these patriots triumphant against what was then a world power? It's because they didn't give up. What if they had said, oh, everybody's right. We can't win this war. There just isn't enough of us to make a difference, to make any changes, to win our freedom from England. So let's just not bother. Let's just let this rickety government the king is trying to run from across the ocean collapse. Then those people who love the British so much will see that system just won't work here. We've had some defeats. We're not so sure we're going to win. The war just isn't going in our favor. Let's just drop all of this, face reality, and just go home. What would happen if those soldiers just gave up? We certainly wouldn't have won the war for independence, not at that time anyway. And having given up on it once, it would just be that much easier to do it again and again. Hey, it didn't work that first time we tried it. Let's just give up again. The reason we didn't do this is because it's not the American way. or at least it didn't used to be. Americans didn't give up. They kept pushing and pushing until they made it. They didn't quit. In fact, we look down on people who did quit, who did give up the fight. But now we're taught that it's okay to quit. It's okay not to achieve. We have whole youth sports leagues who don't keep score, so no one will get their feelings hurt. How can you get any better if you don't keep score? Is the goal in life just to keep busy? Is that what we're teaching our children now? Getting better isn't the goal. Don't compare your score this week to last week's and try to do better. Just running up and down the field, just looking busy, that's the goal now? Those patriots fighting for our independence would be shocked to see that this is what our country has evolved into. How we've let their hard work, their blood, sweat, and tears, all that effort, we've let all of that go to waste. How we have a lot of people in this country who just want to throw all that away. Also, some busybodies in Washington can rule over us. A bunch of wimps and pansies, people with no backbone, who wouldn't be qualified to be cheerleaders on the sidelines in the game of American life. These are the people who defeated you? That's what these patriotic soldiers would be asking us. These are the people you allowed to defeat you? This bunch of whiny little children are the ones that defeated this nation. After we fought our hearts out against the British, a highly trained army, real men fighting us, and you lost this country to these weenies? I hope you would feel embarrassed at the thought of facing one of these gritty soldiers and having to explain how you were beaten by these sissies in government. Personally, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not just going to hand my precious freedom and liberty over to a bunch of mama's boys in government. It's just not going to happen. I'm not a quitter who's going to roll over and let you trample my freedom under the boots of government. Patrick Henry was right when he stated, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." That's this radio show. If I can't have liberty, then I'd rather be dead. What's living without your freedom and liberty? Here's a fun fact, it isn't. But too many people in this country are willing to not live. Just survive. Just look busy. Not improve. Not do better than yesterday. Not excel at their chosen profession. No, they just want to give up everything they have for the supposed security of government. God help us all if we lose the patriots fighting against this type of society. Fighting against this culture of, it's okay to be mediocre. It's okay to restrict freedom and liberty. It's okay to look to government for answers instead of yourself or your community. For goodness sakes, we have a president whose sole intent seems to be to bring down this American spirit of freedom and independence. Every problem needs a government solution. You can't make it on your own. You have to have government in your life. 90% of what a true leader does is to be a cheerleader, to tell people you can do it. You don't need government. You have within you the drive to be successful. All you need to do is harness it. Another 5% or so is removing the obstacles of the people trying to follow your advice. That's what a true leader does. They get people started in the right direction and then get out of the way. I guess in that context, though, Obama is a leader. He's leading people down the road to more government, and he's definitely removing the obstacles towards that goal. I guess I should rephrase those statements I just made at a good leader does this. I mentioned this before, but it strikes me the parallels between government and a cult. They both have charismatic leaders. They both want to take over your lives, want you to feel like you can't live without them. They both want to cut you off from the people who might tell you something different. They both try to make you paranoid about those who don't agree with you, who aren't part of the cult, part of the faith. And oftentimes, the people within the cult will defend to the death their leader and his or her principles and goals. If you try to talk to them, if you try to rescue them from the cult, they'll often fight you over it. And if not them, the other cult members will. they'll fight to keep this person under the control of the cult. They don't want any outside information getting through. That's why I'm here each and every week on this radio show. That's why we're putting our website together to help spread the word. That's why we're working to get this show on as many radio stations as we can. And with your help and your listenership, we will succeed at that. We're up on, the last break already here on the Patrick Riggin Show. We're officially now in the holiday season, and we'll have a little holiday message for you in the last segment. So join us, won't you, here on the Patrick Riggin Show and the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Welcome back to the Patrick Riggin Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and locally on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. In this last segment, I want to talk about an issue that comes up every holiday season. We see stories over and over about all the people who are going hungry during this time of the year. I guess no one cares about what happens to these same people after the holidays. Apparently, it doesn't sell newspapers or advertising on news broadcasts during the rest of the year. No, but every holiday season we get all of these stories about how the poor people aren't going to have a Christmas, and how the rich are all fighting over whatever is the new craze this season, new whatever toy it is. With that in mind, I want you to consider this question. Why do we penalize productivity? Why do we penalize people getting ahead? We don't try to hurt healthy people so that the handicapped and sick don't feel less than adequate. No, we try to pull up the people with disabilities so they can be part of a society as well. But when it comes to successful people, our government seems to think it's advantageous to penalize them through higher taxes and instilling this hatred against that group of people. In no other parts of life does this happen except in taxation. Even though it's been demonstrated over and over that through taxing an activity, you get less of it. This really shouldn't need to be studied because it's common sense. If the more money you make, the bigger percentage of your income you owe to the government, then what is certain to happen? The rich don't make money at the expense of the poor. Although if you listen to President Obama and quite a few people in Congress, you would think this is true. Economic development is positive. It isn't a zero-sum game. Someone doesn't have to lose for someone to win. A rising tide does indeed lift all boats. The reason government hates this type of argument is because it takes them out of the equation. People who want to control your life don't want you able to provide for yourself. They don't want your boat being lifted by economic activity. They want your boat being lifted by government. After all, if you aren't dependent on them for your living, then how can they control your life? The answer is they can't. So government is going to fight anything that moves you more towards independence. For those of you screaming at the radio that I'm wrong, only ask that you consider the poor in this country versus the poor in other less developed nations or countries. I've said it before on the show. We don't have poor people in this country. We have people who don't have as much money as others, but that doesn't make them poor. The Census Bureau has reported over the years that 30 million people in America are classified as living in poverty. But if poverty means lacking nutritious food and warm housing and clothing for a family, then we don't have that many poor people. The poorest Americans today live a better life than all the richest people 100 years ago. The typical household defined as poor by the government has a car, air conditioning, 2-color televisions, cable or satellite TV, a DVD player, and a VCR. And if there's children in the home, they more than likely have a game system like Xbox or PlayStation. This isn't some pro-capitalism foundation making these statements. It's the United States government, the Census Bureau. The poor households also had a refrigerator, an oven, a stove, and a microwave. Also, a lot of them had clothes washers, clothes dryers, ceiling fans, cordless phone, coffee maker. Now, not every poor family has all these items, but a large percentage of them do. Again, not according to me, according to the United States Census Bureau. They also reported that the home of the typical poor family was not overcrowded and was in good repair. In fact, the typical poor American has more living space than the average European. The typical poor American family was also able to obtain medical care when needed. And by their own report, the typical family was not hungry and had sufficient funds during the past year to meet all their essential needs. Again, not me saying that. In that case, the family was making that statement to the Census Bureau. I'll read it again in case you missed it. The typical family was not hungry and had sufficient funds during the past year to make it meet all essential needs. According to the government, poor families reported struggling to make ends meet, but in most cases, they were struggling, and this is what they're saying, the family reported they were struggling to pay for air conditioning and cable TV, as well as to put food on the table. Some 70% of poor households reported during the course of the past year they were able to meet, quote, all essential expenses, which included mortgage, rent, utility bills, and important medical care. Only 13% of poor households report that a family member needed to go to a doctor or hospital at some point in the prior year, but were unable to because the family could not afford the cost. The government is not only violating the Constitution, and thus the law, by taking money from one citizen to pay the bills of another, it's wasting it as well. We will always have people who don't have as much as someone else. That's a fact of life. What the government wants to do is make sure everyone gets 10 pieces of candy, even if it has to steal 6 pieces from someone else to do it. And stealing is never the right thing to do. Doubly so if a government is doing it in a supposedly free country. That's why I say private charities are the way to go. Private charities allow you to help people. Government forces you to give money through taxes to give to someone else. Private charities don't do that. It's up to you if you want to give or not. While you're thinking of that, though, another important thing to keep in mind is a lot of how these charitable organizations, they use the money you're giving them. This is why I say go to charitynavigator.org. Charitynavigator, that's altogether.org, and you can check on the charity you're giving money to. On that site, you can go look for a copy of the IRS Form 990. That lists where your money goes when you give it to a particular charity. Now, some charities aren't big enough to require filing of this document, but most do it anyway. And if you want a copy of one, you can call the charity too, and they can mail you one. But the reason I ask you this is some charities don't pay their people anything. 100% of the money you donate goes towards helping the people who use their services. But some charities pay their people a salary, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But you need to check on how much that salary is and the median income in the county in which they're located. If people in that particular charity are raking in 2 to 3 times the median income, then I'd probably look somewhere else to donate. The deal you make for working for a nonprofit is that you'll generally make less than the private sector. That's the deal. Because all the money you make, every bit of money they're paying you, is not going to help the people your charity's supposed to be helping. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't get paid, but you should look at that pay in the context of where they're working. All right, we're up on the last of the show here. If you want more information about us, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Patrick Reagan Show. Also, you can go to hear our archives at youtube.com/Patrick Reagan Show. And then you can also email us, patrickreaganshow@gmail.com. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, just drop a card or letter to the WOKI studios. Remember, liberty begins with you in your mind. Join me next Saturday afternoon at 4, where we'll be fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.
Read dozens of books about heroes and crooks, and I learned much.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on the Patrick Reagan Show. Be there.